Welcome everybody to the Sales Leadership Excellence Workshop hosted by the TCU Sales Center and the Brevet Group. Have an extremely important topic today. As sales leaders, sales managers, and individual contributors, we all know what the importance of coaching and leadership is, and that the linchpin of the sales organization really is those that can really coach and develop their teams. And so in that, we've partnered with the Brevet Group to bring to you an amazing session today. I'm gonna give you a brief introduction of how we got here, who the Brevet Group is, who the team members are, but how we got here is the TCU Sales Center. The foundation of what we do is we teach our students how to sell. So not just role plays, not just going through theory, but also practice. So 95% of y'all on the call today was contacted by a student. And in that, I just want to give you a brief overview. We had 59 students that contacted 2,707 prospects, held 792 meetings, resulting in 213 sales. So if any of y'all are looking to hire talent, a 7.87% conversion from a cold prospect to a sale, I think that's pretty good. So we have 59 students that would be more than happy to join your organization. So with that, this is our third workshop we've held at TCU. And in looking at, we wanted to find something that brings value to the business community. And one of the key topics in the world, this virtual world that we're in right now, or hybrid world, is developing talent. And so through the partnership of Professor Hutchinson, we interacted with the Brevet Group and thought this was a perfect organization to deliver this type of workshop on coaching, leadership, so that you and your organization can develop your organization for success. So a little bit about the Brevet Group. Brevet is a sales effectiveness firm, founded in 2012, and it's really a balance of data-driven decision-making and consulting blended together. And kind of what I want you to think of that is it's academics and practitioners working together to bring science and art to what they do. They've interacted and coached over 30,000 sales managers. So we really thought that was a great baseline for the organization we wanted to partner with. And they partner with clients from all over, from technology, manufacturing, healthcare, and we're excited with partnering with them and bringing this workshop to you today. So I wanted to give you kind of an overview of some of the faces you're going to see today. So these are our facilitators. Our lead facilitator will be Eric and Brian. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, but I want to introduce the TCU Sales Center team. So the first, Jonathan Rhodes in the bottom right. He's a managing partner at the Lowry Rhodes Associates, a boutique executive search firm. I have a lot of executives here, so if you're looking to move places, you're looking to hire people, Jonathan's the guy you need to talk to. He has over 20 years of sales experience, particularly in sales and sales talent development. And also in the fall, we're bringing him on as a faculty member in the TCU sales program. Second, we have Dr. Brandon Chikowski. Got his undergrad from UT, moved to NYU, PhD at Alabama. Then he moved to NYU to teach. He has significant experience in real estate as well as early startup funding. And now he leads the TCU's marketing agency within the TCU Sales Center and manages our 15 interns that do everything from social media to video development. And then lastly, we have Professor Corey Hutchinson. He has 20 years in sales leadership, and sales process consulting. Most recently, he was a senior VP at VMware and now is semi-retired. As being semi-retired, he's a CEO and founder of Sales Audit, published a book in 2007 titled Sales Audit. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it for you and your organization. And he's the executive in residence here at the TCU Sales Center and really helps us bring practice to the academic side of sales. So with that, that's the team you're going to see popping in and out of the breakout rooms today on our side. And I'm going to let Eric from the Brevet Group take over and introduce himself as well as the Brevet Group.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. It's an honor to be able to connect with such distinguished colleagues, of course, from TCU. And it's also pretty awesome on our behalf to be able to talk shop and rub elbows with everyone that signed up today. So we're really looking forward to that. Brian and I share similar backgrounds. Zach gave you a few of the highlights, but for the past 25 years, we've either been in leadership roles, much like the roles that are represented here in the audience, or we've had our sleeves rolled up working with leaders like you on a variety of projects. We think that the roles that you're in, or the role of the frontline and midline sales leader, really is the bee's knees. Zach, you said this as part of your introduction, but we think it's through that role that the art and science of sales comes together, and it either collides into some chaos or it blends really well into results. And we like to participate on the latter where we can. I think what might also be good news, of course, is that today is not the world according to Eric and Brian, that we've got a lot of good practical experience in working with customers of all types with a bunch of different perspectives, right? We're not making this claim because we have all the answers today. We're going to be relying pretty heavily on you to participate, to tease out a lot of the great knowledge that you have. But we do think all this work leads us to having a good and keen sense for the complexities and challenges that modern sales leaders face today. So what we're really trying to do is create a marriage today between us. If you think about a great relationship, it takes a few things, but we'd like to marry the passion that we have for sales leadership and the role itself with your participation to ensure that you walk away saying, hey, this was time well spent. I'm glad I was there and I got something out of that. So we've organized our journey today accordingly, with lots of opportunities to intersect. We've got chats, as Zach pointed out, and some people are already chiming in. Thank you a ton for doing that. We've also got polls, as you experienced, opportunities for some annotation and use of Zoomware, if you will. But I think most meaningfully for this group is the chance to also roll up your sleeves with peers, people who have like circumstances and like roles, and test out your hunches and your hypotheses and really talk shop with one another. So we're going to afford you great opportunities to do that. In fact, we're going to leverage chat right now as our colleague Justin puts something into chat for you. It's a workbook that will operate as the foundation for the discussions we have. We'll talk in more detail a little bit later about how to use it and what we'll do with it. But if you notice that, that would be fantastic. We also, all of us, the folks at TCU and us at Brevet, have sat on both sides of this camera, so to speak. So we have an appreciation for that as well. We know it can be hard to go take away ideas from here and activate them and put them into motion. And it was important to us that this not be a one-stop initiative. So the HubSpot that you logged into to take the self-assessment, and we're hoping you all did and have access to that, is also going to be used to carry and extend some of this knowledge forward. We're going to be standing up things around recordings, some of the supporting documentation that you're going to see in tools, as well as some supplemental information just to support the general concepts. And we hope you come back and visit that site at some point after the session. So Ellie Sparks earlier already did this. I appreciate that, Ellie, if I'm saying your name right. We want you to jump into chat, begin that process now. We want you to put the information that you see on the screen here: name, location, organization. But we also want to set the tone for a candor and maybe a little humor. If you're willing to share an interesting fact, we'd love you to do that. We get it. Interesting is relative. For example, I'm on camera a lot these days, and people love to play the celebrity you most resemble game with me. And the two celebrities that I get most often are sort of dated, but one is Danny Bonaducci from the 70s and the other is Conan O'Brien. I find neither particularly flattering. I don't necessarily enjoy it. However, that might be interesting to you as for instance, for something you could put into chat. Just kind of in a goofy way, wanting to set the tone for a lighthearted set of exchanges today. It's really important that you consider this a very safe environment. Tons of thought leadership today that would say that safety as a culture are the underpinnings to true innovation. So again, I'm going to reiterate, if you have hypotheses, things you wanted to try, or you want to gain perspective, your willingness to share information back and forth with one another is the linchpin to whether or not this becomes time well spent. If you're willing to participate in earnest and let go of a little fear as you exchange information with one another, there's zero doubt that this is going to go well. For those that haven't Zoomed on a regular basis, we want to give you some Zoom counsel. When I logged in this morning, I happened to notice that my colleague Brian had logged in with his usual Cool Daddy 94. And as I had to explain to him, I don't know that that's a naming convention that people can relate to. So if you've got some kind of a number and name enigma on there, like CJ 8000, we'd encourage you to right click and maybe change the name. To encourage engagement as well, would love it if you would be kind enough to turn your camera on, especially in the breakouts. We know that that encourages great discussion, back and forth. What we're really saying is we want you to bring your best self, and we also want you to bring your authentic self, sort of. If you've been on Zoom or seen, for instance, Cat Lawyer, and I recommend you look that up on YouTube if you've never seen Cat Lawyer, some things can go awry. So I put this little bit of humor in here on purpose. We know you're wearing a Zoom suit of some kind, which is the apparel equivalent of the mullet hairstyle, some kind of business on top, and maybe athleisure wear, whether that's Adidas or Lululemon on the bottom. We get it. But this was also more of a way to say things aren't going to go perfect today. When you've got a group this size jumping in and out of breakout sessions, you don't know each other. There will be some awkwardness, some things, might be clumsy from time to time from a technological standpoint. If you're willing to bear through that and stay pure to the idea that you want to get some great insights and ideas and take them with you, then this is going to go super well. And I thank you a ton for taking the time to join and for TCU for hosting. So thank you. Let's get started.
Being nimble, being agile, being flexible. In some respects, that's kind of the definition of how we've spent our lives over the last 12 months. I mean, you think about how dramatically our world has changed. All the new words, the vocabulary, the things that just seem so, unbelievable 12 months ago are now some of our new habits. It's an interesting sort of experience to been a part of over the last 12 months. I mean, it really comes to life in some of these amazing statistics. I mean, look at this. Survey of employees, 98% now say they want a permanent work from home solution. Dramatic change if you look at where the trends were over the last decade or so. Even more remarkable from our perspective is senior executives saying, hey, we're good with that. 82% really embracing this new hybrid and flexible kind of work environment. Not a good harbinger for the business travel world, right? Look at the statistic, 40% decline, permanent decline projected in terms of business travel. This is huge impacts of the teams that we're leading and what we do day to day, right? Getting on a plane, having sort of that autopilot path to the airport, that was sort of what defined our world. Major change. Look at this, just one example of where this is really impacting. This is not a good business to be in right now, especially over the last 12 months. The men's suit sale business, as an example, significant decline there as we've all embraced the elastic waist pant, as Eric has mentioned. Some of us have had different kinds of impacts, right? This has been a boon for certain segments of the economy. Look at this dramatic increases of sales of different sorts of adult beverages. Eric may be responsible for 1 or 2 percentage points in these statistics. So again, dramatic changes. Look at this growth in terms of streaming on Netflix. That we've again developed new habits into our ways of living our lives. So let's go back into chat. I'm just curious. We've all picked up some new media habits, some other sorts of things. What's been your sort of guilty binge show that you may have adopted over the last 12 months? Drop that into chat. Just another way to kind of get to know each of you. Tiger King, I don't know, that's probably a Corey or Zach thing. I could kind of see that maybe, or Bridgerton or others. Drop that in there. That'd be fun.
I saw Lane happened out there to say all of the above. I'm in agreement. My streaming time, as that Netflix statistic pointed out, has gone up significantly. I'm running out of shows though, so that's why we actually inserted the chat. Just want to give you more recommendations.
That's right. New world. I guess, for our conversation today, here's the point. Obviously, this is having major trickle-down effect into what we do on a day-to-day basis professionally, right? What's going on with our buyers? What's going on with the folks that our teams are engaging with on a day-to-day basis? Look at some of these statistics. This is data that come from research that we've conducted over the last really 3 to 4 months as the world, again, continues to change. 64% of buyers are saying they're even more confused about their issues, how to prioritize decision-making inside their organization. Huge implications to how we think about what the role of selling is. 82% saying now that financial ROI, show me the money, that is now the most important decision criteria. Always been important, but look at that dramatic change from 2019. Deal cycle time, significant lengthening of deal cycle time. More people are getting involved in these decisions. Risk and uncertainty continue to prevail, particularly in complex business-to-business markets. And this is one, honestly, this really strikes me personally. I take offense at this, but it is a reality that we've got to face. This is actually a statistics from our friends at McKinsey. 74%, let this sink in, three-quarters of your business-to-business buyers are now saying, hey, in an ideal post-COVID world, I never want to engage with a salesperson face-to-face. Wow, what an impact that has, an implication in terms of what we're trying to do as we lead our teams. The short story of all those numbers, guys, is that obviously change is the key word in our worlds. This is not new. This is just a continuation of what we've seen over decades as buyer expectations have increased on our sales, on our sellers, on our teams. And what the pandemic has really done is just been this massive accelerator effect, right? This is not like a new set of changes. This is just an acceleration, a speeding up of a set of changes that we've seen and been tracking for decades. And it has huge implications on what we do as leaders, for those of us who aspire to be leaders. And I like this analogy. This is a photo of one of those famous canals in Paris. And many of you have seen those in person or seen them on film or video. They're beautiful in the daytime. And normally it just defines what is the beauty of an amazing global city. But every 20 years, they actually drain those canals to do maintenance. And what do they find at the bottom of those canals? They see the ugliness, the pollution, the damage, the cracks, all of the flaws, the gaps. I would submit to you that that's a little bit what's going on, particularly as sales leaders. We have organizations that we knew maybe underneath the surface had flaws, but in growth markets, in easy times, we tend to ignore that. This is our opportunity. What are we going to do in this time as really a moment in time for us to address some of those gaps, but really doing it in an optimistic way? How do we set ourselves up for success going forward in what is a continuously and fast changing world? And that's what our conversation is going to be about in our session today. Again, some final statistics. We talk to your peers, we talk to maybe even to you. 81% of you are telling us that you're significantly rethinking what it means to even have your sales organization right now. What is the profile of success? How do I want to think about the system that I'm operating? What is the very definition of an effective seller? Lots of new ideas. What does it take to be a winner in this new environment? Obviously, the importance of technology, the importance of analytical, smart selling, clearly major themes that you and your peers are telling us. From a sales manager, sales leader standpoint, significant increases in the amount of time being devoted to what we think are the essentials of being a great sales leader: pipeline, forecast, deal inspection, one-on-one coaching. Significant increases. Again, important harbingers of what's going on in our world. So clearly times of great change. I love this quote, CEO of HubSpot: will they crush you or will they catapult you? And that's the question, I think, in front of all of us today. And that is, again, our opportunity. So I'd love to do a quick additional poll, just as you reflect over the last 12 months or so. How well have you adapted in this most unusual, but at the same time, potentially exciting and an opportunity to elevate things over the last 12 months? Are you still focused on kind of fighting fires? Are you starting to hit your stride in the new world? You're executing better than ever before. So let's see what some of these statistics can look like.
People aren't able to see the results just yet, but at first it looked like a horse race, pretty even across, but suddenly it looks like things are settling down, kind of the conclusions we've come to, right? So people aren't fighting fires as often, and stability is kind of rearing its head. So we're excited about that. Thanks for jumping into the poll.
Awesome.
So we want to set the tone for changeability, right? And this reminds me of, one of my favorite quotes comes from and is attributed to Jerry Rice. I went to Google last night just to make sure it was still attributed to him, and it is. He said that, today I will do the things that other people won't. So tomorrow I can do the things that other people can't. And we know that coming to a session like this and organizing around change is difficult. And we also know that there's a lot on your plate. It's become cliche to say that, the sales leader is the toughest job in show business, as they say, but it truly is. There's a recognition by senior leadership in most organizations that things have changed so rapidly that they need to turn to sales leaders for the answers. And creating enough time, energy, and space to accommodate the multiple roles that you play is important. You're toggling between delivering business results to coaching individuals to try to drive to performance. So today's sessions, topics, and discussions should lead us in a good direction. I do want to point out, though, that what continues to rise is the idea that we are the most significant lever as it relates to achieving business results. So putting that time and energy here is worthwhile, and it is time well spent if we do it well. What's happening, and I like that poll because it was suggesting that hair on fire is kind of falling by the wayside, and that thinking about new and adjusting and hitting your stride have become more commonplace. Some new factors for success have begun to reveal themselves. This is a pretty lengthy list and a lot to absorb, but I want to draw your attention to a couple of things that we see as new modern characteristics. One of those is, sales models are changing rapidly. Geo-based territories that are typically governed by, size and volume bands are starting to change, not calling inside and outside to more specialization and more verticalization. The idea of being local is giving way to being present, for instance. Instead of local, I just need to be able to get you, and I want deep domain experience. Probably not lost on the group here. The other is the profile of the successful seller is beginning to shift. It's not that there isn't a need for charisma and charm in selling, but the idea that the charismatic seller is the chief profile is giving way to, more of a planful, organized engineering type brain as project management and the need to get more precise more quickly with less time becomes important. And finally, woven through multiple of these characteristics is the notion that, data-driven is rising. There are data to make all kinds of decisions, from prioritization of territories to, where with precision reps need coaching and guidance. And it won't be too long from now, if it isn't happening already, that those of us in sales leadership will begin to be shamed if we're not properly leveraging those data and using them to go inform and make decisions. So what does all this mean as we really get forward into the real meat of what we're going to talk about today? We're going to need new skill sets. We're going to need new tool sets, but without the right mindset, it's hard to get started. So some of the pre-work that we hope you did, and I'm hoping you're going to grab and access right now, was meant to help us begin shifting that mindset. There was a series of questions that we posed that you had to give consideration to. They weren't meant to be overly provocative, but hopefully they did get you deep in self-reflection. Having a benchmark is a great place to start for where your head is going to be really important for laying down some of this new modern wisdom that we're going to do today. So this does lead us to our first breakout session, which we're very excited about. So if you've been tuning in and out, which people do, and we get it, I'm going to try to grab your attention because this is where chaos can happen in a group this size if you don't follow what we're trying to do. So you have a workbook. It was dropped into chat not too long ago. And on page 7, you're going to find the foundation for the conversation that you're going to have for about 20 minutes with a set of peers. We've done our best to organize these peer breakout groups with people who have like roles to yours. So you had weighed in that you were in several different categories. We tried to group you accordingly. And when you get into these breakout sessions, we're going to ask you to choose a scribe/moderator, just somebody to guide the discussion. For each of the breakout sessions, you can choose a different one. So this doesn't saddle one person with the responsibility throughout the rest of the day. But here's how we think we could give some guidance for you to choose a scribe and a moderator. If there is a TCU alum inside your breakout group, we just voluntold them that they're going to go do this. If there is not, then maybe swing around and see whose birthday is closest to today. And for at least this first breakout session, that person's going to be the scribe/moderator. What we're going to be asking you to do is go to the share screen. It should be green in your Zoomware right now. Go to share screen and share the workbook page 7 so that everybody can see it. And there are really 4 discussions that you're going to have. The first is maybe looking through the lens of those original questions where you had to answer strongly agree to disagree, and maybe just highlight the ones that people were saying they strongly agree with or really don't agree at all. And that way you don't have to swing through all the questions. That's box 1 at the top. Then there are a series of questions that just help lead to what's hard, what gets in the way, and what do I think I need to stop doing to poise myself and our organization for change properly. This is also just the first place to be brave. Remember, it's safe, get in discussions, test your theories and just have a good conversation with everybody. So you're going to see an invite come out in just a moment, and you're going to accept moving into the breakouts. Anything I've missed or any one of our colleagues wants to add as we transition into this first breakout?
Just make the point that you'll see some visitors. So we're going to be popping in, Corey, Zach, others, just to help you keep on track. But be flexible, guys. We're going to devote about 20 minutes to this. So you do need to be fairly efficient once you get in there, make your assignments, and get to know a new friend and have a good conversation. And we'll see you on the other side. We'll bring you back into the main session after about 20 minutes.
Yeah, last thing is that workbook is available on the chat. So if you're not seeing it, you can go in and drag it there.
Perfect. All right, guys, for the power of Zoom, we're going to send you away.
See you soon. Hello, all. Welcome back. I see you're all arriving. It's not always completely synchronous as people come back. I thoroughly enjoyed jumping in and out of the breakout sessions and hearing the discussions. And thank you very sincerely to those that stepped forward and were willing to guide discussions. It usually takes some fearless folks to be willing to go do that. I heard conversations from someone named Blake who was talking about being in the automotive industry and the challenges in motivating and managing a team of potential friends, for instance. Matthew Ross and his group talk a little bit about the counterintuition of some of the questions that were in the pre-work, where you don't want to get locked in on having a perspective and only managing to that perspective. That today's modern leader takes a little bit of flexibility. So really enjoyed hearing all those discussions and people being willing to share.
Awesome. Does it look like we've all made it back? That's the biggest challenge of these breakouts is sometimes we send you to other meetings coming out of the Zoom breakout. So if we're still talking about sales excellence and sales leadership, then hopefully we're in the right spot.
Yeah, I got dropped out of my meeting.
Well, you made it back. That's good.
Yes,
So,
many of us did. So it's good to see most of us back. You may have to admit several more.
good stuff. Well, as we're reconvening here, we want to put you to work again. Many of you guys have used this annotate feature. This allows us to kind of scribble on the wall like we did when we were kids and got in trouble, but we won't get in trouble this time. We're going to annotate and use this as a way to share out just some thoughts about what we had talked about in our breakout. So you'll see on your screen a little drop-down menu, this view options, click the annotate, and then you pick a stamp and see someone's already figured that out. And then we're going to go to a page here and kind of hear where you guys are landing in terms of some of those pre-work questions. So there'll be a way for us to compare notes and debrief where we are. Now, I'm not going to go through all 15 of those questions. The rooms I dropped into, you guys were having a really great dialogue, as Eric said. I'm kind of curious. Let's just pick a couple of these. We're not going to do every single one, but honestly, this very first question was driving a lot of good conversation in the rooms that I was able to be a part of. This, all the things we were just sharing, kind of a different, unusual world, and how it's starting to reframe and sort of re-scramble in a way what our view of what success looks like and what do we got to do to be successful and win in this new environment. So I'm curious, where are people coming out on that first question? I have a clear vision. So kind of in the middle, some good kind of in that agree area. A few of us are on the left-hand side. Man, that's awesome to see. You guys already have good confidence and have got it all figured out. Some are more, looks like maybe sort of gravitating a little bit to the middle.
Oh, shit,
Yeah, I got a comment there from the technology world, and I heard this first back when the internet was just emerging and there was a whole lot of new communication standards, and I was kind of on the bleeding edge in telecom, and a speaker at a seminar got up and said, if you think you understand all this, you're not paying attention.
That's a powerful piece of insight for sure. And when the more confident you are, maybe that makes you give a little bit of pause. I want to flip down to the number 3, which is kind of gets to a little bit of our own decision-making style. Question around maybe I find myself having to move forward with a complete and perfect plan. Like I've got it all figured out, and I'm moving forward with that. Is that okay? A little bit more on the positive side again. Again, I think that's maybe the comment we just heard. Sometimes that may be a pause for us to think about our own confidence, especially in sort of this ambiguous world we're a part of. Let's flip down to number 7. This is little professor trick here. We actually had a little bit of a trap question for you. We had this question around setting stretch goals for my sellers. Where did you guys land generally in that? More in the middle. I heard some good debate in the breakouts I was in. I don't know about you, Eric, but it was actually some pretty heated conversation over that very point. Here's the interesting thing, guys, is we've done a lot of research with your peers. We're able to tease out some of the highest performing leaders. What we do find, the data would suggest that setting stretch goals, while that might work in some circumstances, it tends to not always be the most important strategy. Part of it is, how do we set appropriate goals? How do we motivate performance? And particularly in an environment where people's quotas and targets last year were just blown away, right? Some of that stuff just made no sense by the time we got to April and May. So that's one to kind of watch out for as we start to activate some of this in this new world. A couple more real quick, and then
I was going to make a quick comment on that one, because it did come up in one of the sessions. And I think what reared its head coming out of COVID, right, was this notion of authenticity and empathy, right? So today, just having realistic conversations about goals, the ability to achieve them, can earn you a lot from a sales leader perspective. So I think, that came up in one of the groups that, I jumped into. So
yeah, Eric and Brian, my general thoughts on this is stretch is you got to change the thought on who sets the stretch goals. I'm a big believer in coaching that when you stretch, it's the person you're talking with and coaching through the goal conversation that should set their own stretch goal. It's what they believe they're capable of, and it's our job to help support them in achieving that stretch.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's exactly right. Hey, I got one more question. I'm just curious to kind of take the pulse of the crew here. Let's jump down to this last question, number 15. Your comfort in sort of this ambiguous, changing environment. How you feeling? I think there's some feeling of optimism in a lot of the rooms I were in, and I think a lot of our own clients, right? If you were to ask that question 6 months ago, felt very different than today. I love to see that optimism. Look at that, Eric. Because that is a key requirement, clearly, in this new world, is navigating, making decisions, being nimble, as we talked about in this new environment. That's great. So I think the theme we really were talking about again is this mindset shift, and how do we step up into this new environment? And what's awesome, I think you guys are already you're pros at this. You're stepping into this change, stepping up to the challenge, and that's our opportunity. How do we use this as this period to take things to the next level? And what's required for that? What are the components of effective sales leadership in this new world? Eric, talk us through a little bit about what does that look like for us today?
So I think there are a lot of things to consider. I actually want to grab onto something that came up in one of the breakout sessions that we were just talking about, which is collaboration and creativity sure are hard when you're trying to lead from a distance, and people are hiring entire sales teams and sales leaders that have never met one another live. So I think one of the things to draw attention to, and we're trying to model some of it with this annotation, is just the idea that you got to figure out how to do everything in a hybrid way. What if I need to do it live? What if I can't do it live? And how do I go and approach this? And we had actually centered some thoughts on this with another opportunity to annotate. So I'm going to put up a slide that was part of the self-assessment that you did and get you to start thinking about each of these dimensional areas: strategic sales leadership, opportunity coaching, pipeline coaching, skill coaching, management cadence, and team development. So as part of the pre-work assessment, you were asked to think about percentage of time that you were putting into some of these, and you were asked to rate yourselves. Let's just start with time spent. If you think of those 6 dimensions being an important part of what it takes to be an effective sales leader today, how much time do you spend on each of these? And maybe I'll just start. We can even leave it here, Brian, while maybe you make some points as well. Just start checking which ones you think you spend the most time on, and we'll see if we get balance or if there's some areas that people are thinking are more important than others.
Yeah, so drop in, use your annotate tool, mark the icons on the screen of these different 6 components. Where do you find yourself maybe spending the most amount of time in today's world? I love the coaching stuff there on the right. That's certainly important, as Eric was highlighting, Corey's point as well. Strategy, strategy is like making up strategy as we go along, right? That certainly is taking a lot. There's no playbook necessarily to follow, having to make some of those decisions day to day. So that makes a lot of sense.
I'm also seeing, we would expect to see a high number of checks in pipeline coaching. It's the center of the mini business universe. That's never going to go away, right? So that's important. But I like that we're seeing a balance, as you pointed out, Brian, with strategic sales leadership. It's an opportunity right now to revisit how your customers buy and maybe reimagine some of your modeling and some of your approach. We consider that, strategic sales leadership. And then I see a lot of heavy focus, and I agree, on opportunity coaching. If nothing else, we got to keep and save and grow the business. And one great way is to dive in deeply into opportunity coaching.
Okay, that's super helpful. Let's do another question then. So Justin, clear the board here. I'm curious, where do you find yourself maybe wanting to spend more time, but just because of the realities and fighting the fires and the demands below you and above you, where do you see that you're just not spending enough time? Makes a lot of sense, right? Sort of the reality of the urgent, and sometimes the urgent and unimportant oftentimes gets the focus. Skill coaching, I think that's a theme. Corey, I'm sure you validate that as well. I mean, oftentimes we're spending a lot of time on pipeline. We're getting frustrated around, we're not seeing the results in pipeline, and not taking the time around the skill piece that obviously will help lead to better pipeline, better opportunities. We're going to get into some of that detail later on in our session, but that makes a lot of sense. It's maybe a gap.
Yeah, and Brian, one comment on that is in the skills coaching, what happens a lot, especially in this world, is leaders go to off-the-shelf training content that may or may not hit home for the entire team. And what we're not finding or spending enough time doing is determining individuals in our team where their skill gaps are, identifying those individual skill gaps, and then providing custom training for them to improve individually. what we do is we dump an idea. For example, we need product training, and we dump the idea, and everybody at the far right who knows the product exceedingly well doesn't get value. Those at the left who may not have the aptitude to pick up the product training and that kind of a skill set or that kind of training will not get better. And so the time is really about individual identification of gaps and individual coaching.
That's right. Wise words. Okay, guys, so the point of this, and again, this workbook is something that we want you to take with you. This becomes, in some respects, the elements of a great day-to-day playbook, but we'll spend more time in our session today going through this wheel, but we want to orient you to a little bit back to this mindset. This is what a great sales leader's job is. You've got to find this balance across each of these 6 dimensions. And you've got to figure out, what's required today. What have I got to stop doing? That was some of the conversation, some really, I think, good discussion in the breakouts was, hey, this is really forcing me to think through some things that are honestly getting in the way, things I probably should not be spending time with. So let's come back to this wheel throughout the session. And I want you to take this. And in some respects, a great discipline for all of us is to take this and go compare this against our Outlook calendar for the week. I mean, it is powerful when you look at your busy, busy, busy lives. But then if I was forced to put those into categories, I might find myself spending some times in things that maybe, again, are urgent, but not the super important things that are going to make the difference in the numbers and in our teams right now. So good conversation. Hey, let's dig a little deeper into this wheel. So when we organized our time today, our idea was kind of splitting in terms of 2 big topics, things that we thought were super important for us to be successful. Again, those aspiring to be sales leaders and those of us who are leading sales teams to success in this environment. And we like splitting this wheel into 2. And let's dig a little bit deeper on the left-hand side. Really, it starts to look at what is the system? What's the management process that we want to have into place in our teams in this new environment? How do we make this really operationalize what is in our heart a great idea, but how do we make it come to life in the day-to-day? And I often come back, and you guys can abuse me on chat. I'm married into an Auburn grad, so I get a lot of abuse anyway, but whether you love him or you hate him, you got to have a lot of respect for Mr. Nick Saban. 7 national titles, 87% win rate there at Bama, been number 1 in the polls every year since 2008. I mean, the guy clearly knows what he's doing. Again, love him or hate him. Here's the deal. Why is that? A lot of books have been written about this. And I think this is an important lesson for us this morning as leaders. Those of us, even casual fans of football or any kind of performance, know he's got this idea of his process. It's all about the process. You think about all the assistant coaches that have rolled through in and out of Alabama over the years, yet their success continues. And his point is, it's not about any one of us as individuals. It's about the system. It's about the process. And I love this quote here. The process, Saban's term for his system, it's on the steps to success versus the end result. And that's really powerful for us in this environment where there's so much ambiguity, so much unknown. Again, we're trying to set strategy minute by minute. How do we stay focused on our core, on the process? What is our own inner scorecard? What is the system we're trying to implement? And how do we have trust in that system so that we can be successful? And our point of view, and we want to present to you guys today and challenge you that a critical component, in fact, the most important driver of your modern sales system is this idea of an effective cadence to your team. What's the rhythm? What's the discipline that we're going to use as we interact with one another on our teams, as we're asking our reps to interact with their managers, with their peers? What is that? What is that consistent, steady drumbeat that drives the heartbeat of the organization? And this is absolutely critical because what it does is it starts to define the discipline and the effectiveness of these fragile touch points we have with our team members. I mean, think about it. All you have is time, right? How are we allocating our time? And when we're undisciplined in our system and we're undisciplined in our cadence, what happens? we have these one-on-one touch points with our sellers, and they end up being the most ineffective touch points ever, right? We start out, hey, how was your week? Let's talk about the 3 or 4 deals that are in flight. Let's talk about the customer blow-ups or the account stuff we've got to do a save. Hey, what's going on forecast? Hey, what's going on with this? Hey, there's some new product coming out. Let's talk about that. Oh, by the way, I'm sure you've got a question around comp and crediting. Hey, there's new things going on in the competitor market or the customer, on and on and on and on. It's clearly like this poor girl in the photo. Your reps are drinking from the fire hose. Those of us who are on the receiving end of this, it's what it feels like. That's what we're trying to avoid. That's not effective use of our time. That's not the system. That's not the process we're trying to put into place in the modern world.
Say, Brian, just a quick point. Since we have individual contributors on the line, as you're looking at this, I'd love for you to think about being on the other end of this. As leaders look at this, we're having thoughts about how do we not fire hose our team? And as an individual contributor, I want you to think about your own calendars and how much of your calendar and time is spent. And then when you enter a coaching or a one-on-one session with your leader, are you concerned that that's going to be a mini forecast call or a mini performance review instead of a true opportunity for you to share what's going on in your world where you could use the help? So I always want to flip it, because with individual contributors on the line, don't disengage, because I want you to think about how it feels from your end and how you would do it differently when you get to the other side, because that's how you learn best, is sometimes by your worst leaders, you get to be the best leader in the next life.
That's exactly right. And I love this. And this is Corey, this is, one of your favorite points, right? How many of us have been the victim of what we refer to as the stump the chump, right? Like just random lack of discipline, lack of good cadence, and you're on the receiving end from your leader of random calls at random points of the day about a random data point on some random spreadsheet and report. And again, it feels like you're stump the chump. I'm just trying to throw out a bunch of random questions for you to answer. That's not a good use of the leader's time, obviously. And it's not a good use of you as an individual contributor, but it's a symptom, again, of a poor cadence and a poor system that we're trying to encourage you guys to invest in. A lot of our calls sound like this. I mean, we have literally were on the receiving end. We were listening in on some coaching calls, and I am not going to lie to you. This is how the call started. Hey, how's your cousin's dog? Again, touching base, building rapport, having great, strong relationship with your team members. That is awesome. That's critical. But again, it has its time and place. We've got to have the right discipline and the right focus. And then, again, we're guilty of this. Maybe we've been guilty on the receiving end of this. Is the leader gets on, no structure, no discipline. So you end up with just very vague questions. Hey, this is your time. Let me know what you need from me. And then, you get the good sense that maybe the leader is a bit like this woman here, kind of tuning out. That's what we're working to avoid. How do we have a process and a system, again, this cadence, and now is the time for us to hit the reset button, for us to get this built right for our new world. And we're talking about what is a series of touch points? What are the right touch points we want with our team members? How do we have it calendared with the right frequency? How do we have the right people involved in the conversation? Because again, if we look at our busy calendars, if we were honest with ourselves, how many of these meetings do we really need to be a part of? How many meetings are we have too many people on the line? And then this idea of an artifact, we have the right artifacts. What's the right reporting? What's the right data we need to bring into that conversation so we can have fact-based conversations? So we're not having a lot of just, I'm thinking, this feels like this, etc. Getting this all correct is the core to the system. That's what we're aiming for. That's what builds us to be the champions in this new environment. We have that again so that we can free our energy and our time to focus on the strategy, to focus on the problem solving. If we're every week trying to define our calendar and trying to redefine that week to week, we're going to be in trouble. And a lot of resistance, people say, look, that's not how I lead my team. I want to be flexible. I mean, some of the greats, so you look at Steve Jobs. I mean, he was infamous and famous in some respects for wearing the exact same outfit. Why do you do that, Steve? Well, that's one less thing I've got to think about. I wake up every morning, I just put that entire part of my brain so I can focus on the creative, the problem solving, the strategy. And that's our opportunity as leaders. How do we do that? So we're going to present to you, and I want you to look in your workbook. There's a lot of detail we're going to throw to you, but we're going to put this into a breakout to get you guys to compare notes here in just a few minutes. But if you go to page 9, what are the elements, the building blocks of this world-class cadence and system we're suggesting to you is so critical today? On page 9, we really lay out 5 key types of touch points we want to be building with some discipline and some consistency, the elements of that rhythm and cadence. Pipeline conversations. Let's be clear about what that is and what that isn't, right? Customer conversations. There's a series of conversations, things we're doing sometimes internally to talk about specific customer accounts, and sometimes that are actually joint customer calls and meetings. There's a series of planning meetings. There's a series of things that are more focused on people in the development of the team and individuals. And then a standard ways that we want to maintain communication, particularly in a very virtual. We're not able to do, in some respects, the sales kickoffs face-to-face and other sorts of meetings face-to-face. So again, having that rigor around what is our way that we're keeping everybody on board and informed in this new world. So think through, yeah.
Brian and Eric, in our breakout, this was a big conversation. And I hope in the breakouts when we go to this, communication is a hierarchy now. Very much about what's the appropriate way to communicate about the appropriate topics. And our room was amazing at this when they said, look, I use text for bursts, real just quick bursts of catch-ups and touch points. I use emails for things that need to be recorded and logged and looked at later. I use the phone, which is back in vogue now, surprisingly, for quick personal interaction. And then if I have to set up a Zoom, I set my agenda very differently, using a little time up front to just get everybody to breathe because they've come from 14 other Zooms. And it's really become a hierarchy of how I communicate most effectively. So as leaders, and by the way, as ICs, you want to use this. You don't text for everything. I don't want 3 screens of texts, but you also don't Zoom for everything. So that'll be a point I'd like to make sure the rooms cover, because I think that's important.
I think that's spot on.
I was going to chime in as well. I mean, the notion that communication is a pinpoint element of this set of dimensions is really important for many sales leaders right now coming even out of a session like this. You're going to have to go be different. And one of the things that Sandy actually in chat pointed out is, great one-on-one success and the set of expectations for what that should look like aren't just a unique set of responsibilities for leaders. That has to be communicated to the team. What's expected? How much accountability should they have for thinking through with critical judgment and thinking the elements that are here? So I think having communication here and being very intentional with it is important. All the way through the instruments that you use, Corey, like you're pointing out. This could be texted, but this requires kind of a one-on-one conversation or a team conversation. So I agree. I think putting some special attention to communication as a dimension right now is an imperative.
So I hope you're picking up on sort of the tension we're trying to create in your own mind, right? Because think about these 5 categories. Now stand this up in contrast to the picture with the poor girl in the garden hose getting just fired at with all of those topics on one conversation, right? This is the essence of this modern sales management system. We think this is the opportunity. How do we use a framework like this? And this is going to look different for your team based upon your model, all kinds of things. What's the frequency? That's your job to go figure out. But thinking in these building blocks will help us stay focused. And what's cool, again, it feels overly rigid maybe at first, but what this is going to do is going to free up your brain to focus on that hard problem solving, that strategy, and the brains of your team as well, so that they're not worrying about, again, week to week, what my calendar is going to be. We've got that rhythm. And what's super powerful, and we've all been either as a person invited to these meetings or someone maybe running these meetings, when you know what that agenda is every week, we're going to have the pipeline conversation at this frequency. These are the kinds of questions I'm going to be asked. Guess what? These meetings are not 2 hours. They're 20 minutes. because I'm prepared. And then again, we're diving into the detail on one-on-one. I'm not spending my pipeline call going through everybody's individual deal, and then 2/3 of the room or 99% of the room is all zoning out because it's not about them. Likewise, I don't have my people conversation, which is about retaining our people, helping to develop them to the next level. I'm not spending that and wasting that talking about pipeline. That's not fair to them. We've all, again, been the victim of that perhaps. So really absorb this. Look in your book, because I want you guys, this is going to be a lot of work, I think, post coming out of this session. On page 10 is a click down with additional details. Just, again, it's a framework for you to compare against your own worlds. What are different sort of sub-meetings that might appear within those categories? But I think, again, the opportunity for us to take things to the next level. Corey, I want to invite you back in, because I think this is something that you've been living in terms of your lives, and you've seen this to impact. You know, this is one of these common sense, but unfortunately not common practice in our world. What are you seeing just very practically? What are the barriers for us to do this?
Yeah, and what I find fun about the group that we have on this call is that everybody has a different view of what a pipeline is, right? And so everybody has a different view of the kinds of conversations they have with customers, the kinds of planning they do. Business planning, territory planning, account planning, opportunity planning, and we all do it differently based on the industry or the kind of role we have. But we have to have this system for two reasons. One, if you are a slave to your calendar, you will never achieve for your teams what they need from you to be successful. And this idea of rhythm, Brian, is really important. Expectations for your team, so that they don't fear the phone ringing and then they start screening your calls because they're in the middle of something else that's on their calendar and more important. You start to force them to make decisions. So a rhythm of the business from leadership gives comfort to the sales teams underneath you, that they know what to expect, how to respond, and how to be prepared. They know how to get an A in academic terms. You also mentioned it before, and for those of you who haven't done this, a 2x2, just a square with 4 quadrants, this urgency and importance grid. I used it in all of my meetings where we would talk about a topic, and as a parking lot, you'd use one of the quadrants. And if someone brought up a topic that was either unimportant or not urgent, it went in the right category and you focused on it later. But everything to the upper right that was both urgent and important, we all came to agreement through this meeting and through that structure of a cadence that we would work on it together. So if it's done consistently, it aligns the team around what is both urgent and important. It tells the team what they need to be at and how to prepare. And most importantly, gives them this beautiful idea of how to get an A, which is what everybody in the field wants and wants to demonstrate to their leadership. We don't do it when we're a slave to the calendar. And I went as far as to ask my teams to color code their calendar. Customer time, strategy time, administrative time, and other. And it's funny when you do this just for 1 week or 1 month, how much you realize the red pops out as the things that are not important and not urgent, i.e. administrative stuff that you spend so much time on. So those are kind of some of the tool sets and mindsets, but the cadence is critical for your team members as much as for you to focus on what's important and to let them know that you are teaching them how to get an A.
I love that. And again, I think that speaks to this larger theme is let's use this now. This funny sort of in-between period we find ourselves in. Let's use that as the catalyst to rethink our cadence and build it. Some of you guys, are world-class at this, and that's awesome. And let's get into some breakout conversations, and I'm sure we can learn some great things from you. And then others are, maybe in an opportunity for us to do a bit of a reset. Maybe we're struggling. We got one of these components nailed, and then we're working toward getting another element more effectively. So that's what really we want to center this next breakout around. We want you guys to reflect on your current rhythm, cadence in your business. And again, if you're an individual contributor, that's awesome, because you're sort of participating in that as well. Love your observations around that, as well as the leaders who are setting that for their team. So flip over to page 11. We're going to go through a bit of a similar dance, right? We're going to pop into a breakout. going to spend 20-ish minutes on this, but very quickly, if you guys can pick someone to be the scribe, to share the screen, and then a moderator to help keep things going. And again, we'll pop in, make sure people are on track, answer any kind of questions. The essence of the conversation is thinking through, where am I now? What's my self-assessment of my effectiveness along each of these 5 dimensions? And be honest with ourselves. Because again, that's sort of the core of us being vulnerable and setting ourselves up to improve. Let's be honest with where we are now. And then maybe have a little dialogue about what's getting in the way. What are some barriers? Maybe what are the things that I'm trying to really improve or change given sort of a new virtual or hybrid working model? So all those kinds of things I think will be good conversations. Anything else, Eric, we want to make sure that they cover in this dialogue?
No, I think people got active in the last one, carry it through, and we'll see you shortly.
Tell you what, so through the power of Zoom, Justin, let's take everybody into their breakouts. And again, 20 minutes or so, and then we'll bring it back and we'll do a little bit of a debrief.
Hey, it worked.
Yay! Hey,
Yeah, there
Justin,
are great points in the breakout room. I liked it, and boy, we had some great conversations. Heidi, great conversation as well, and just great job.
Corey, in addition to Dr. Hall, then I'm going to call on you to share some of those observations as you jumped in and out of the groups.
Sure. Well, and I think the hard part is to get everybody's feedback as they have scribes in the room, and it is difficult, but I'll do some of that, and then I may call on some of the folks I talk to see what they say.
Cool. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to give everyone a minute to reestablish themselves here in the main room. And as you're coming back, let me just give a sincere thank you to each group. I know many of us are jumping in and out of the rooms, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I am abruptly inserting myself into those conversations. I appreciate you letting me do that and coming up with some observations to share with the broader group. And I think the enthusiasm that's taking place in the rooms is appropriate and fitting. So I'm going to maybe leverage a few of my colleagues to get some insights here in a moment. And in the meantime, you're going to see a poll asking you to reflect on your cadence and how much needs to change. As I transition to soliciting some input from my peers here, I thought it was interesting to see that the spectrum of usage of a rhythm and cadence was pretty wide, from don't have one to, not sure what to look for within it or how to judge hours, to people that have pretty rigorous programs. So Dr. Hall, Zach, you had been talking on a break about some things that you had seen in the discussions. Care to share?
Yeah, so I want to touch on 2 points. The first one was Daniel Bogart. I thought it was a great point that he talked about customer touch points and customer coaching. And I've seen this a lot, is really a lack of structure. So it's one of those things, going on a ride along without, but what the point of the manager being there, how the coaching is going to occur. I thought that was a really great point by Daniel. The second point that I would love feedback from all 3 levels that are here, individual contributors, managers, and executives, is the rooms that I went into rated themselves very high on all aspects of touch points, 5s and 4s, all the way across the board. And something interesting is most of these were individual contributors and some managers in there. And so the question is this a kind of a blindness that maybe they are overemphasizing or overrating themselves? Is it that maybe a new generation is better at empathizing, providing structure? And so kind of leave it out there. I saw really high ratings of those, and kind of curious on if those groups want to chat up of what they saw, as well as other groups kind of chiming in.
Yeah, thanks. We'll monitor the chat too if folks are going to put some insights around what has been posed. And also we're getting ready to, or we're sharing the poll results so you can see where most people fell. Corey, I'm going to get you to chime in as well. You visited quite a few rooms. What were you seeing and hearing?
So back to Dr. Hall's point, a couple of things that sprung up for me. We had brand new managers who've just taken over new sales teams. One, the very first thing, and this was Mitch, comes in and lays down the foundation of the Cadence, the operating system. Really good to see. We had another, and Michael brand new. Michael shared that he's taking over a team, and he said, I've got nothing. And this is really important to start to set these things up. Here's the thing that Dr. Hall said that I think is so critical is self-awareness, right? You have to be honest with yourself that we do or do not do these 5 aspects well. And many of you have been doing it a long time. Many of you are brand new. I can personally share that after 32 years of sales leadership, communication, I just learned something. I came out of one of the rooms where they use Slack as the way they communicate throughout the day. They found a brand new way to set up a morning Slack session. They put up a Slack team. They're allowing their salespeople to turn off advisements throughout the day so that they're not bothered. That is just the sign of a very regimented and solid cadence that people can count on. And so I just thought the spectrum was important, but here's the thing that I thought I heard that was missing was the frequency of these touch points has to be dialed in, right? I can tell you for a fact, I've had team meetings every week, and 3 out of those 4 in a month were wasted because we'd get on and we'd talk about things that weren't business related, and then we'd get off and everybody said, I'm not going to the next one. So this concept of frequency, the other takeaway was concept of agenda, to have it, hold it, follow it. And if it's not necessary that week, cancel the meeting. And then attendees, don't invite everybody on the planet to every meeting just to make them feel good. This has to be about this. The meeting has to be impactful to the attendees, and they have to come to participate. As I used to call them stand-up meetings, but stand-up meetings and a basket in the middle of the table for your phones. You show up, you're either part of it or you're not. And if you're not planning to be part of it, don't show up. So those are the things that I heard in this room that people are doing amazing things with, but you also have to think about style of your company and your organization, because some of that doesn't fit. Some of you don't use Slack, some of you use Teams. So you just have to think about what works for your culture. But the idea of format, frequency, attendees was things that I did not hear that I'd like more focus on.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that, Corey. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask people to participate with some annotation. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and this is going to test your mental acuity a little bit. If you've been up there in view options and annotate, you got to choose a stamp, choose a check mark to tell us where you think you're strongest. And if you wouldn't mind, also use an X mark to show us where you're not. And we'll see these things jump back and forth, but I'm interested to see what people think. And I want to talk about one theme, one observation, and lead into some potential next practices here that we're seeing. Okay. Yeah, we see disparity here, which speaks to, people are at different places in maturity around having a rhythm and cadence. So thank you for the candor in sharing the annotation. So one theme, Corey, that you underpinned is it takes real intellectual honesty to do any of this well. Whether that be the willingness and ability of reps and managers to talk to one another about where development needs to take place, but also just myself, looking in the mirror and looking across at these building blocks and determining, where I excel and where I might need to make some adjustments, right? The other thing I want to draw attention to, and Corey, you talked about this even before the breakout, is the notion that consistency is incredibly important, but not just for us managing our teams, but the rhythm and cadence that you establish as a sales leader often becomes the rhythm and cadence that the rest of the business wraps around. And when I was a VP of sales, I would regularly get asked by other senior executives how they and their teams could get involved. And with an unpredictable system and not recognizing where potential positive intersection points are, it's harder for everybody. So for instance, I'm going to lead into a couple of best practices I've seen. For many of you, you might participate in what have been called affectionately war rooms or win rooms or deal rooms, where you get a whole bunch of good, smart, and creative people together to look at deal conditions and provide insights and inputs, and people can ask for, help in certain areas. I've seen a podcast approach, a very fluid and informal way to bring product and value propositions to life across an enterprise, where you might interview a series of subject matter experts over a period of time. These could be standard parts of communication. Ultimately, what I'm suggesting is you can manage up in your business as well using a strong rhythm and cadence. Here's what we need to do as a business to achieve, and optimize our potential here. So thanks for letting me share those. And thanks for participating in the annotation. It speaks to, yep, everybody's at a different place.
Eric, one thing about this annotation, everybody I'm sure sees it the same way, which is look at the customer and look at the people. Most number of green checks. That is sales to a T, right? We all care about, and by the way, our people are our customers if we're leaders. And if you're an individual contributor, you should feel like a customer of your leader. And so that's where we tend to gravitate. We don't spend as much time in the planning side. We don't spend as much time thinking about a hierarchy of communication. And pipeline, for the most part, we hate it because it's the hardest part of our job. So we don't tend to focus on it enough because we're spending time with our customer and our people. Very fascinating, I think, this annotation.
Agreed. And again, it's doing it and then also doing it effectively. So great conversation in the breakouts I was a part of. Thanks again for the honesty. And hopefully this does set up a set of to-dos for us coming out of this session. What do we got to do to take things to the next level? And I just want to pile on before we take a little quick break here is this very point that Corey mentioned, that Eric mentioned. Guys, that's all we really have is our time. It's all your teams really have is your time. So what can we do? What does our system look like that allows us to be the most effective users of that precious time that we have? And Corey mentioned this 2x2. And you guys have seen this in other training. I'm telling you, this is one of the most powerful frameworks for you to think about as you look at your calendar every week, for you to coach your teams around as you're looking and checking in on their calendars, is where are we in this dimension of the 2x2, the importance and the urgency. And unfortunately, again, if we were really honest with ourselves and looked at where did the week go, right? A lot of our time is in situations where we're kind of in high, urgency mode, but maybe not the most important. Those are the things that really challenge us to make sure we're focusing on the right things. So maybe internalize this a bit, practice this, put this into place as you look at your calendar. Hey, the other thing as we go into the break, I want to challenge you guys to think through, now is the time for us to get creative. I love technology as a piece of that. Corey had mentioned Slack. There's a lot of technologies, frankly, we've talked about for a decade. Now seems to be the time people are finally getting some adoption because they realize it can help save their time, help drive their focus. Here's some real quick time hacks that we've seen across different teams we work with. Curious if maybe you have your own, or you've used some of this. We talked about routine. That's sort of the essence of this rhythm and cadence. Maximizing, again, that calendar, minimizing the context shift. This is especially hard for leaders, especially hard for new leaders, because you're moving from account to account, from rep to rep, from territory to territory. That is a cognitive beatdown. There's lots of science that says in our world that we're filled every day with all these Zoom calls after Zoom calls. We've got a big load on our brain. So we want to minimize that. Think about arranging your calendar so that you minimize those shifts back to back. One of the hacks that we are pretty diligent about here at Brevet, I don't know if you guys have any former military folks on the call, but this idea of the DOV, what's our definition of victory? We like to set week to week, even in a world like this, maybe day to day, what at the end of the day I've got to declare victory on, I've got to accomplish so that I can be able to, again, mark my progress and not get bogged down. To-do list, Only handle it once. That's probably a time management trick from 1975. That's still very, very powerful. Proactively closing out our day, spending 10 minutes at the end of the day, making sure we're clear. What did we get accomplished? How do we prioritize the next 24 hours? And of course, celebrate our successes. So you guys help us with that. When we come back from a break, I'd love for you guys to drop into chat some hacks that you use. Would love to steal some ideas. We're always looking for some good best practices. So I've got our time. We committed to you giving you a little bit of a break. Again, Zoom is hard. Stand up, stretch, go do a bio break, check in with your customer, but don't go too long because we're going to get going at the top of the hour and we're not going to wait on you. So give you about 24 minutes and then we'll reconvene. You can just leave this Zoom open. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Put yourself on mute and we will see you at the top of the hour, guys. Professional ought to be on your stop list. There's a lot of start things we're hoping to share and hope you guys are picking up and getting excited about, but oftentimes that exposes things that probably should be on our stop doing this. So maybe put some of those thoughts in chat as we reconvene together.
Yeah, Joe, if there's one theme out there, that's an important theme and needs to be at the ethos of all leadership strategy today, especially with data. One size fits all leadership just doesn't work.
Michael had a point about stop responding to emails and thinking that's your job. You know, that is a really interesting, I'll tell you a quick interesting story that I started with a company years and years ago. And I was meeting with the head of HR, surprisingly. And he said, there's one rule I'm going to give you that'll help you in this company. I said, what's that? He said, until somebody emails you 3 times, don't respond.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow. And that was the same company, by the way, that turned email off between the hours of 8 o'clock and noon and 1 o'clock and 5 as a productivity tool. So I'm not condoning that, but I think the point I am trying to make is this issue about emails being your job. Email is, in a hierarchy of communication, it is I'll get to it after I have a chance to read it, usually an overnight thing. This is not, email is not a spontaneous thing, but we make it spontaneous and that becomes our job. We become a slave to email. So very, very good point, Mike.
Yeah, it's getting worse. I think, again, in this work from home, always on Zoom call, it's just too easy. I mean, there's certainly been a lot of productivity gains, but at the same time, again, maybe now's the time to step back and figure out where the right balance is for that sort of thing. All right, awesome. So it looks like we're slowly coming back together. We'll give folks a minute or two. But those just joining us, hop on to chat. We were interested in just, learning from you. What are some things that maybe after this conversation or stuff you'd already self-identified might be on your stop list to be effective in today's environment? Stop replying all. That's a classic from the beginning days, right? Still violated. I love that. That's good. Eric, that's a great point. Again, it's almost too easy, and we're at full steam, it seems. So trying to have some intentional breaks, do that strategic thinking. We talked about that wheel and that the strategy part's hard to do that when you're just fighting fires minute to minute.
Yeah, speaking of the day of rest, I was just commenting on a LinkedIn feed around there being 8 different acute types of rest, and paying attention to that can be important.
Yeah, just even the short walk. I love that suggestion. I mean, I find myself just occasionally just, getting out of your Zoom square, right? I mean, this is our new world, is this little box, and being able to move around, see some sunshine, see a different scene. That's super helpful. Well, awesome. All right, so great ideas on the chat. So you guys keep using that as we go through our time this afternoon. Thanks for allowing, frankly, that break was just for Corey, myself, and Eric. We needed that, and thanks for joining us back again. We're going to dive back into the conversation and really kind of continue from what we talked about this morning. Again, we're going to go back to this wheel time and time again. I want you to think of this as a bit of your map to think about the time you're investing, how you're organizing your energy and effort. We talked a lot on the left-hand side before our break. That's that system, that's that cadence, that rhythm. How do we implement that to be more effective? I want to shift to the right-hand side, which is our other very, very strong belief that we're passionate about, is, that's the tough job of a leader, right? You've got to set the tone and set the system on the left, make sure you have the discipline in executing that. But at the same time, you've got to be a world-class coach. You've got to know what good coaching is, drive your teams to effectiveness. And that's something that takes a lot of intentionality, a lot of really thoughtfulness. It's not something that you just kind of, again, wait to the last minute and just sort of wing. This is data. We've got the opportunity to work with a lot of companies like the folks on this call are a part of. And one of the standard questions we say is to our leaders, frontline managers especially, where are you spending your time? And this is a fascinating, this I don't care if you're in a technology company, you're in a manufacturing company, distribution, financial services, industry to industry, these patterns are very, very common. What are we seeing on this chart? One is we're seeing you spend your time in a lot of different areas. Back to sort of that theme, you got really a difficult job. But what we see is it's very easy to get sucked into the internal meetings, to the customer fire drill, and what seems to fall to the wayside when that happens, right? It's that coaching time, training, one-on-one coaching. What's interesting, why it's highlighted in yellow, one of the cool statistical tricks is we often will get the high performer list and we'll run a separate analysis. What distinguishes high performers from the average? Guess what? It's the amount of time they're spending on one-on-one coaching and training and development. That's a real differentiator. That's a theme for us. Again, how do we do this right? How do we spend and get our focus on what we know is essentially a driver of great performance, especially now? And it really begs the question, like, what makes a great coach? And that's a really hard question. So I've got a fun little quiz for you. Oftentimes you can define something by what it's not. So this is self-confession time. Look at this list. Use your annotate. Anybody want to self-confess the kind of manager they might find themselves operating in? What kind of coaching mode, if you will? Or if you are an individual contributor, it's total anonymous-ish. So maybe call out your coach, your manager. The poor prioritizers. Hey, I don't got time for doing that coaching right now. Look at all this other busy work I've got going on. I'm the master of the spreadsheet. We talked about the stump the chump example earlier. A lot of times those are spreadsheet master managers, right? I've got this one little nuance, this little question, this data point. The criticizers, always finding fault. Again, that's not good coaching. That's a piece of it, is being honest about where we've got gaps and opportunities. Being too generic. How many of those just attaboy, way to go, awesome? Like, that's not good coaching. Lobbers, a lot of lobbers coming in here. Hey, tag, I'm going to just throw it over the fence. You got it. Coaches that just not even available. Again, that's tied to time management. Optimists, we talked about that actually coming into the break. Maybe some, to be honest, there's a little bit of that going on right now. I love optimism. It's so essential to surviving this role, this whole profession. But at the same time, we got to have that level of honesty. Barragers, takeover artists, that's interesting. Definitely see a lot of that. I mean, we're problem solvers. We're here to deal with stuff. So that is a very common coaching behavior that may or may not be the most effective approach. Lot of things here. Again, appreciate your honesty. So let's talk about, if this is what we know is not the ideal, we know that, again, maybe we're guilty of this from day to day, we're under stress. Let's talk about, how do we get this right? How can we be the coaches our teams want us to be, that really, again, drives our own team performance, the effectiveness, the right kind of culture of performance and winning? The number one complaint we hear from reps when we talk to them and do surveys is this idea that my manager, I love the guy and gal, super smart person, but I'm getting pounded on this, hit the number, make the number. And all of this focus and conversation is coming at me on that, making the number. Why are you where you are against that target? Here's the reality. You've got some smart folks, right? They actually kind of get that already. They wake up every morning, roll out of bed, and they have that hanging over their head. They understand the pressure to make the number. What they're looking for, and the essence of what we need to be doing and what we're striving for as great coaches, is they need help. Help me figure out how to do this. And oh, by the way, attaboy, work a little harder. That's not particularly helpful. How can we help our folks? How do we step up to be the kinds of coaches that your teams aspire to have, and we know, again, drives performance? And I want us to get to really kind of anal retentive about this word manage, right? We talk about our job. We're managing teams. We're sales managers. What does this word manage really mean? Let's be honest, right? I would submit to you that the manage word is a very precise word. It actually says I have some direct control or some influence on an outcome. That if I do something, I execute or take some specific action, I'm going to change or create some kind of change or an output, right? Manage. And it's an interesting sort of thing, because we see this misused all the time. So let me tell you a couple of little stories here. Look at these photos. Can we manage a number? Can we really manage something? There on the left, here's a confession as maybe the Parent of the Year award winner here. I've got 2 kids. And one of the hardest things that I learned as a parent was the annual or once a quarter report card time, right? And you look at those grades and you're frustrated. And what do you do to the kids? You're like, I need you to make X grade. I need to have an A in that class. And so what do? You pound on kids. You're always talking about make the A, make that outcome, manage that. Is that helpful for your kids? Maybe not, right? Maybe the coaching conversation that would be effective and actually have some value and might actually have some influence on the outcome is say, hey, let's talk about what your calendar looks like this week. When is that test? How do we reverse engineer your time? How are you spending the right amount of time on your study activities? What are the good study habits we're using? Are you really doing day-to-day reviews? Now we're getting into not managing that outcome of the A on the report card, but we're getting into things that actually might have some influence. The same thing, that picture on the right. How many of us have started at the start of the year? Hey, the quarantine 15, that's a real thing. I'm going to confess to you. So a lot of us are, trying to trim down our waistline a little bit. I don't care how strong and what kind of great motivator you are, but for you to stand on that scale every day with all of your willpower and try to get that scale to go to a smaller number, that's not going to be successful. You cannot manage directly that number. What can you manage? What is the food I'm putting in my body? How often am I sitting on my rear versus being in motion? The choices I make in terms of the food I put in my body. Those are the behaviors, right, that have the influence over that outcome of the scale or on the grade. So that's the big lesson, guys. What can we be doing as leaders to focus our teams and our time on the behaviors that drive the outcomes? We want to, in a way, avoid what is often a common conversation. So again, confession time. How many of us have been the victim of this kind of a dialogue, or maybe we have perpetuated this, right? Might sound familiar. Manager comes up to the rep. Hey, I see you're behind target. How are you going to get on track? The rep says, hey, man, I feel great about these new opportunities I'm working. Okay. So how many deals you got in your pipeline? Well, okay, about 4. The manager's like, okay, well, just to be clear, you have to win 100% of these deals to hit your number. So might need to think about your pipeline getting a little bigger. The rep's like, okay, yep, you're right. I'm going to work a little harder. Okay, well, I believe in you. I believe in you. Get those opportunities up and your results are going to come through. The rep's like, thanks, great. Let's have a great conversation in the next couple of weeks. Great, good luck. I believe in you. Have you guys done that? Have you been on the victim of that? Again, that sounds very familiar in the conversations we get to listen into. This is an attempt to manage the number. This is not quality coaching. What if in an alternative universe, this example, little silly example might sound like, hey, you're behind target. What are you going to do about this? Well, you're right. I could maybe think about some of my demand generation time, or I can think about upsell, cross-sell with some of our current relationships. Okay. What do you think might be more impactful to hit this number in this quarter? Well, that generating those new relationships, that might take a little bit longer. Maybe I need to be focusing on my existing relationships. Okay, that's great. So what are some of those issues? What's some of the challenges facing you in terms of those conversations with your current accounts? Well, again, we've got competing against a lot of low-cost competitors, and I'm kind of challenged with objection handling in that scenario. Okay, great. Let's start to role play this. Let's talk about some of the language you're using around those objections when you face them around price. Again, super silly example, guys, but this is to make the point. If we're in confession mode, we often find ourselves just, again, under the pressure and under speed, focusing on trying to manage that scale number, the report card. And guess what it is in our business, right? It's the total sales number. It's the outcome. It's the lagging indicator. In your book, you'll see some more detail on this, but I want to walk you through, again, another little mental picture that you can hopefully use as you think through, where am I spending my time? What does this conversation really sound like? And I would suggest to you that we need to think through, what are we coaching? What are we attempting to manage? Are we trying to focus on the top of this pyramid, which really is the lagging indicator? That's the outcome. Call it, again, in your business, it may go by many different names. It's territory sales, total sales, whatever. There are a series of leading indicators. These are your KPIs. This is what we love from CRM, right? I can see how many days the stage something is. I can see all of your activity, your calls, your outbounds. That's good. That's important to track. And again, a lot of systems to do that. But at the end of the day, again, when I'm in my coach mode, when I want to be really driving performance, what's my energy and focus around that bottom of the pyramid, the behaviors? Again, this is, am I making good choices about the food in my body? Am I making good choices about how many minutes a day I'm on the treadmill or I'm in motion? And it often comes down to some very core things: time management, objection handling, basic skills, etc. That's where we've got to orient our time as a manager, because here is the honest truth. When we spend our times at the top of this pyramid, we're just inspecting outcomes. We are reading the news. We're not influencing the news. So how do we challenge ourselves to shift our time and energy and our focus to the bottom of that pyramid? Those are the behaviors that we have a fighting chance to influence what ultimately is the outcome. When we look at teams and we go in and we're nosy and look at people's Outlook calendars and listen into coaching conversations, unfortunately, the vast majority of time, and I want you guys to do a little experiment. The next pipeline call you're on, the next call you're having with your manager, are we spending 80% of our time talking about the lagging indicator? I think that's trending wise, you're going to see proportional more time there than the time spent in the behavior. And this is really, really hard in the last 12 months. We've been in lockdown. Can't do those ride-alongs like I used to do. I don't see that face-to-face interaction with the customer. Those are the interactions that lead me to maybe have more focus on behaviors. When I'm doing things from a distance and I'm just looking at those spreadsheets and the reports, again, it's almost pushing me to have more of that focus on the lagging indicators. Again, we just get frustrated. We're going to have all these meetings, beat ourselves up. If we focus on these leading indicators, we have a lot of these just, again, very full agendas, lots of good data conversations, but surprise, at the end of the month, here we are when we have a miss. So that's the opportunity. How do we even think back to our system as what are the reports we're looking at? again, when we work with clients and we actually look at their sales reporting, what is the standard set of dashboards that leaders are looking at? Guys, like the vast majority of them are on the lagging indicators. Yesterday's news versus the behaviors that I have a fighting chance to coach and develop that ultimately will drive changes in performance. So again, an interesting lens for us to look through as we are trying to dedicate our time to the right places, try to influence the performance. And it really sets up this idea, and we're going to use this in some breakout conversations in a few minutes, but it sets up this idea of this causal chain, if you will, of starting with the behavior and working your way ultimately to a bit of an outcome. I don't know if you really have taken the time in your own worlds to think through this causal chain, but this is really powerful, both ultimately to driving the performance we want, but again, having patience with our teams to drive the right focus on the right kinds of behaviors. A quick example, just kind of thinking through this here. Think about account management, right? I'm frustrated because I don't see the results. I got to work my way back through a little winding chain. Ultimately, I could probably manage folks. Did you fill out the account plan? Many of us have seen account plans and they're of varying quality, right? So there are lots of points and behaviors that I could start to coach around that. You know, are these action items good? Do we have a really good mapping of the relationships in the account? Is it really a complete sort of a plan, et cetera? So those become great points of coaching, ultimately driving some of these leading indicators, number of new opportunities from the account, ultimately my win rates, that ultimately have that influence on the lagging outcome. So again, I don't know if you guys have sort of experienced that, but I would challenge you guys to really think through that lens as you're having the conversations with your team. Eric, I don't know, does this look familiar? Have you been the victim of this?
I have been the victim of this. I did not know you were going to ask me that, but I'm going to share an example. It was just, I was writing a note, you know, I learned a lot of valuable lessons on what not to do from one of my very first sales leaders. And I'll always remember him looking at my win ratio, my win rates, and saying, Wasser, the only thing you're going to close is your bank account because there ain't going to be nothing in there. He did very little to help me land with precision on what I could do to make those improvements early in my career. So yes, I've participated in not doing this well.
I love it. I love it. Corey, I want to bring you back in because again, this is back. I used that line earlier, which I think is just spot on in terms of, you know, explained this way, maybe it's total common sense, but things just get in the way. I don't know. You've seen a lot of teams. You maybe have been guilty of some of this yourself. I mean, what are things we want to just check ourselves against?
Well, I mean, I think back to what we learned this morning as being one reason or one thing that gets in the way of coaching. If we run a vigilant cadence that has our calendar set appropriately, and one of the folks in the room said, you know, I do live by my calendar. If you do a good job of your cadence, what the cadence should do is free up time from not doing all those things that are not urgent and not important to allow you to coach. It's funny, the story Eric was telling, I always try and convince people in my life that, you know, I went to school to be a doctor and ended up being a salesperson. So my father was kind of confused. And I said to him one day, I said, Dad, sales is professional, just like a doctor and a lawyer. Because if you do it right, you'll be a doctor. And if you don't do it necessarily right, you may end up being a lawyer. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Not that being lawyers are bad things, but lawyers ask questions and coach in very different ways. Lawyers are fixers, and lawyers are trying to ask questions to lead the witness to a conclusion. And when you're in coaching, have you ever felt like they're leading you to the outcome they came into the room to talk to you about? I mean, like Eric, I had more managers trying to convince me that the thing they thought I was bad at was what I was bad at. Whereas a doctor in the professional world can't guess what you have until they've asked you a ton of questions about your symptoms and had you come to the conclusion that you have a certain affliction that can be fixed. And I've always said, and you can take this one away, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. And in coaching, it happens all the time. that they're trying to prescribe a solution for you way before they've asked and diagnosed what your symptoms are. And you'll know as an individual contributor when you're in a good coaching session, when you believe that the thing you're going to work on came from you, not from the person asking you questions, the leader. As a leader, you'll know you're in a good coaching session when you feel like you've asked enough questions that the recipient of the coaching offers up the problem and a potential way to act against it. So that's, my feeling that gets in the way is ourselves and our calendar. But if you fix that, the next thing that gets in the way is don't be a fixer and don't lead the witness in your coaching.
I love it. I love it. I love your point about questioning too, because it takes a lot of patience with the questioning. It's not always just that first question that gets asked.
What a great lead in to where we were going. It's almost as if you might have known that, Corey, as we were heading in this direction. The idea, and this notion here of asking 5 whys always reminds me of, I believe it's a Civil War poem called For Want of a Nail. If you've ever heard it, it's short. For want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, a horse was lost. For want of a horse, a rider or leader was lost. And for want of a leader, a battle was lost. And so in that diagnostic chain, you have to figure out what you can control and what you can't. And the more precision you can gain in what guidance and coaching you give, the more time you get back, as Corey had suggested. So top performing leaders are just excellent at cause and effect diagnosis. Now, the 5 whys themselves apparently were pioneered by an engineer at Toyota. And of course, to mitigate quality issues, they became particularly adept at this, and they certainly are known for high quality. But, when Brian and I were talking about that example, I'm like, man, I don't know if I need Toyota to tell me that. If you've ever been around kids, they're masterful. They'll ask you a question and you'll give a dismissive answer. And after about 5 whys, you begin to realize I actually have to get to the root answer here in order to be able to have an intelligent conversation. Which leads me to an example here that's kind of personal in nature. I happen to have 7 kids, and they're all pretty old at this point, but I occasionally get into dialogue that sounds a little bit like this. Why are you late for work? Well, I woke up late. Well, why'd you wake up late? My alarm didn't go off because my phone wasn't charged. Sorry, I have to do my Napoleon Dynamite voice. And then, I lost my phone charger again, and I need to just get that replaced. If I just use your phone charger, I asked you last night. But in the end, the sort of root cause here is a lack of an organized system, right, to approach things. And the examples that Brian was giving a moment ago, I think are really meaningful here. I was tongue in cheek, using humor on purpose to talk about, my former boss talking about win rates. But that's one we all look at, right? What is a conversion or win rate for somebody? And then we have to back up to potential root causes. And sometimes if the diagnosis is off, you put a lot of time and energy and stuff that isn't going to fix the problem. So a win rate could be from too few opportunities. It could lead you up in the chain and more wise as to, I'm just not doing enough business development. But then you look at activity levels and you see that there is enough business development activity level based on what you think ratios should be. And it just leads you to a diagnosis that they're not getting to enough of the right people because of a lack of fundamental understanding of value messaging and personas. They're just not comfortable in having those conversations. You can land with precision on things you could do as an individual or as a team to mitigate that. And that's what we're talking about here. So we've really been leading toward coaching through a different set of lenses. We shared this earlier. 3 things to consider, our own mindset and things that might get in the way because maybe through myopic thinking or any other system, we just haven't broadened the way we've thought about things. We've talked extensively about some potential new skill sets, both with us and modern sellers needing to look different, feel different, and execute different, which also leads you to different tool sets. And we've heard examples from Corey and in the workshop groups for the many tools that people might be using to light these things up. So we want to put you into a workshop now where you get a chance to talk about root cause behaviors for things. So what we want you to start with on the left side is just an inventory, if you will, of mindset, skill set, and tool set gaps based on the discussions that you've been having. Using these 3 lenses to sort through and organize and maybe help to prioritize some of where you might put effort is key. And then I think that'll lead you as a group to a meaningful conversation on picking one fundamental root issue and using the 5 why system to really tease out with precision what's causing it. And getting in that practice and that habit is going to save you that time that Corey mentioned. You know, we've got to figure out how to get time back with a ton of stuff to do. Be more precise with what you understand in cause and effect and providing coaching guidance. So same drill, right? We're going to put you into some breakout sessions. You've had a chance to get to know your peers. It starts with somebody stepping up who might want to be the scribe and moderator of the discussion. And the workbook page to share is page 15. So we're going to put you in those workshops and look forward to bringing you back and hearing what you talked about. Anything else to add from my colleagues and peers?
There is one thing I wanna say is this 5 whys thing. It's gonna feel weird, and it's gonna feel redundant, and you really have to think about the way you would formulate the question in coaching, because just asking why 5 times really feels like you're annoying. It's a bit of the Spanish Inquisition. You're annoying the other person. But if you're in the conversation, it becomes a very natural next question. And so I just want to, I don't want you to look at this and say how sophomoric it might appear, because when you're in the middle of it, doing this in a real life conversation is hard and it's uncomfortable. And that tends to be why we don't do a lot of it. So just the practice it'll be tough, but I encourage you to stick with it.
We think it's a tactical way to get to this bigger idea of really getting us focused on the behavior. Because I think if you ask that why enough, it's going to put a spotlight on those core behavior gaps or opportunities that we really want to be coaching. So, all right, Justin, let's use the power of Zoom again and put us into our breakouts, and we'll pop around to you guys and check in. But it's been about 20 minutes or so, and we'll debrief on the back end. Thanks, guys.
There's still quite a few of you left here in the main room. So I'll just say, hey, all, you should have that invite now to click the blue join button and be able to join your groups. Could be hidden behind something.
No, the join button's not working, Eric.
Okay. It's working for a good portion of people. Maybe one room got locked out. We'll take a look at it, Hank. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. I saw Matthew Ross nodding his head as well that he's struggling.
I'll try to log out and log back in.
That's always a good strategy. If you don't have a join button, we can see who you are still left in the main room. We're going to go do an inventory of you real quick and we'll see if we can't push a new invite to you. Thanks for the patience. Did we mention that things wouldn't all go swimmingly? In the meantime, while Justin is faithfully working to get you joined up, I'm going to go visit a few rooms myself.
Everyone should have an invite to a room if you're having any trouble.
Over the last year, we've only lost 2 to 3 participants in the cyber wherever. Vladimir Putin has only grabbed 2 or 3 of our participants. So we're proud of that statistic.
Oh, that was the 2 or 3 that had a big deal call in the middle of it. You didn't really lose them. They left.
Lost in the cyberspace. Yes, sir.
As people are on their way back, I was truly inspired by groups who were really chasing down some of this kind of cause and effect, and had a couple of examples to share, if I might.
Absolutely.
Awesome. You know, one of the things that we talked about in different groups as a general theme is, of course, you can't do this wrong. So people, you know, got a little hung up on the asset or instrument in following the whys. But I'm just going to give you two examples that I loved. One was Michael Pavlock talking about a root issue with, you know, my word, I called it hubris, right? Thinking you know everything. But as he progressed to talk through the whys, it took two distinctly different paths. With a digitally native generation, you know, some of that was just being in a hurry and skipping steps. And what do you do to draw attention to some of those steps? But as he looked across at a different, more tenured group, it became about really not knowing what some of those additional digital steps are and might do to benefit the process, right? So those lead you to two very different prescriptions if you follow the why paths. One of the other ones I liked a lot was remote selling motivation. I think this was Matthew, and hard to create spontaneity is kind of where it was leading to. And Brian, another contributor there, talked about you know, beginning to think about different ideas here for prescription. There was a root cause around not being able to create the beehive mentality that many college students, if you're hiring younger generations, are used to, and collaborating and talking to one another. I've seen prescriptions on hot office hours, people showing up in these open spaces virtually just to create that spontaneity. I've seen cooking classes. I recently read an article about the death of the work friend and doing anything you can in happy hours and other to create that beehive mentality. But people were really chasing down from issues some of the reasons, which was leading to some real precision in prescription. And I enjoyed it and thanked the groups.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to. You know, we sort of set this up as a frame. You know, again, it's not perfect, but it is kind of interesting way to think about the categorization of those issues, right? Are they broader mental framing, mindset-y kind of things? Are they just, I don't have the innate individual skills, or maybe I'm lacking I have some gaps around some tool sets, technologies, et cetera. So let's do the annotation real quick. I'm just curious, as you were doing your investigative work, trying to lead through diagnosis before you went to the prescription, where did you seem to find a lot of those issues landing? A lot of the mindset, that's interesting. A lot of the skill set. What's interesting as us, because we spend a lot of time coaching and developing sales teams, is if you look in, on average, where is most of the training time spent with our teams? A lot of it is on the tool set, a lot of on the technologies. Can I get the stuff into CRM? Why won't people use my CRM system? They don't know how to use CRM. Well, maybe that's a challenge for us to step back and think, maybe it's a mindset issue here, right? Have we really done a good enough job to explain to our sellers why it's important for them to do that, or what's in it for them, et cetera? So see a lot of overweight mindset.
We talked a lot in our group about this, and Jordan was really good with one of her ideas around, you know, this issue of self-motivation in a secluded world. But is there a way to quickly identify, because some of these feel like mindset, but probably are skill set? It's not hard to identify when a tool problem occurs, but mindset and skill set tend to blur. Is there anything you can offer that says this really is more in the mind than it is in the ability?
Yeah, I think a bit of that is some of the trial and error for the 5 whys, right? Sometimes we initially diagnose as some kind of a skill set issue, and we'll put them through some training, we'll do some ride-alongs, and they may master that. So I think, again, as we start to go through, it's like modern medicine diagnosis. We don't always know what that is. Sometimes we have to try and do a little learning as we go along.
Yeah,
I don't know, Eric.
Yeah, I want to share an example. Thank you, Corey. It lit up another one that I meant to draw attention to. Is one of the organizations actually used a positive to walk through the 5 whys. You know, it started with the idea that top performers in their organization are astute note takers. They're good at it and they do it religiously, right? And people who struggle don't do it as often. So they started to go through the whys, and that again took 2 different paths. But the point here is that they walked through all 3 of these dimensions. There are things they needed to do to shift the mindset. There were certainly things they could do to augment and enhance the skill set. And for one of the paths, which was just, it's hard to do and I'm busy, a different and new tool set might alleviate some of that pain. So I thought that was a good example of using all 3 dimensions to think through it.
I love that. Let's do another quick annotate. I think as we look at common things that are, again, across both mindset, skill set, and tool set, I was just curious, would you put some of your issues with your teams, or maybe, again, self-confession, maybe your own gaps and opportunities, things like time management, product knowledge, customer knowledge? I'm just curious how your process knowledge, core selling skill. This is a theme. I tell you what, Corey, in your years leading teams, time management, I'm sure that's absolutely critical. That's not a surprise there.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, what we talked about, one of the challenges we had was, the inability to reach an executive. And when you think about the inability to reach an executive, the immediate thing you think of is, well, I don't have the skills, right? I don't have the ability to talk. But the reality is, it's more of a mindset issue around the confidence of understanding how to ask questions at all levels. Different question of a technician or a lower level participant than there is in the executive suite. So it could be a skill set of the question asking. It could be a mindset of the confidence in asking those questions. And so you really do start to see dual paths on some of these issues around performance, Eric.
And I'd mention lack of customer knowledge there too, because if you knew what was important to that executive, you wouldn't have too much trouble getting his attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads as well, Hank, to tool sets, right? What tools do I use to understand the problems that an executive has in that industry? So really good point. And these often are multi-pronged, which, by the way, brings me to my final point. In our room, I felt like there was this, you walk into the room feeling like you already know the problem. And the example I shared got a couple giggles, but my wife calls me the fixer, because I usually try and fix the problem before I know what the problem is, because I enter the room, very little time to have the conversation, and kind of knowing after 33 years what the problem's going to be. So I lead the witness here. Coaching and asking those questions to let the person come to the conclusion that they have an issue or a behavior that they want the help with is very hard. And so being a fixer is one of the challenges here that I think eliminates your ability to get to the common root cause.
I totally agree. I think Zach, I saw earlier, Dr. Hall earlier made this point, which is just spot on. If we think about what great coaching really is at its core, it's great selling, right? Just as we know our sellers would often walk in to a customer conversation, always already listening, already jumping to conclusions, not taking the time to go through that diagnostic process. Lo and behold, we often are victims and do that as coaches. So think about all the things hey, we're going to not ask enough questions. We're going to make those assumptions. We're not going to let the seller/customer come to their own understanding of the problem and own the solution and the way forward and build that commitment. Again, a lot of good lessons in that.
Brian, remember the one other thing is, when you sell hammers, everything looks like a nail.
That's right.
The biggest problem you have is getting your mindset out of what you sell and into what the problems the customer faces is. If you were a doctor and only had one pharmaceutical to sell, everybody would have the same sickness. And so you just have to be really careful about that in coaching, that you don't presume you know the problem first. It's really hard.
Absolutely. The final quick point we want to make, again, we're kind of entering our last few minutes in our session. Just like in great selling situations, we don't come in with the one-size-fits-all approach. I saw somebody in chat was really getting into that earlier, and that's true in our terms of our coaching, right? We don't walk in with the exact same coaching style or mode. We're adaptive. We're nimble. What are all the things that we might want to be taking into account? Maybe there's some other things that you consider. Put that into chat as we think about a good coaching conversation. How do we want to adapt? How do we want to tailor our coaching, right? Obviously, our sellers are in all kinds of different spots in terms of their own experience and their tenure and just their own mindset around things, different kinds of situations. We talked about those different parts of the cadence. Are we talking about an opportunity? Are we talking about a larger account? Again, timing and urgency, right? A lot of times we're fighting a fire, maybe a really critical customer issue. Again, my coaching mode is going to adapt there differently. So this is an important reminder. I want to present to you guys, it's also in your workbook, one final little tool and trick and framework to put in your bag to help you be a more effective leader down the road or even now. This idea that in our brain, we really think that there's probably 3 different modes I want to operate in as a coach. And let me just kind of offer that up to you. And I think this is a way for us to think, again, how we would adapt to a good customer situation. How can we adapt to different coaching scenarios? Sometimes we find ourselves, and I'll call this the teacher mode, right? Sometimes we might find ourselves as more of a collaborator, sometimes more in an advisor mode. And we find that these different teaching and coaching modes come to life in different common situations, right? So teacher mode often is something we will be applying with our new sellers, folks that are either new to role or maybe new to their career. We want to be a little bit more directive, right? Folks are lacking maybe a good understanding of what great looks like. So they need that modeled, they need that to be a little bit more directive and demonstrated in our coaching interactions. We stay in coaching mode, of this teacher mode, for all of our professionals all the time. That's not a great experience. That's not driving effectiveness. So we know that we're going to evolve, and this typically happens as someone's career advances more into a collaborator. These are folks, again, if you're showing up and we're talking about the same one-on-one concepts over and over again, trying to apply the one-size-fits-all coaching, that's not a good model. What does this collaboration look like? Like they're really looking at maybe help getting to those root cause behaviors, helping to have another set of eyes to self-diagnose those issues. And then finally, this advisor concept for our most senior people. And we get a lot of pushback. Folks are like, look, I've got a team of very senior professionals. They've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and they don't want me to coach them. And I love this question. It's a challenge. This is for you to kind of think about this. I mean, it's really hard to think about, a top performing athlete in any kind of sport that's going to end his or her career without a coach. I mean, it's just got to take a different style, different approach, different mode. We got to be conscious of that. And what does that look like for our highest performers, for our seasoned reps? Again, I like this idea of an advisor, right? These folks are, again, looking for someone that might help them see maybe that more strategic picture around their situation, help be good partners with them, help take the barricades down. I mean, obviously, they face some issues even in your own organization. They're looking to you to get stuff out of the way so they could go execute. And again, having this kind of frame helps us just be a little bit more tailored in how we go about our coaching. So you may not have had these labels, but I think these concepts may be familiar. You might have found yourself commonly in one or more of this. I want one last quick annotation here. I'm curious, a couple of questions for you. Which of these modes do you think you might find your coaching is most often in? Do you find yourself most often coaching as a teacher, as a collaborator, or maybe more as an advisor? Use that annotate tool and show us where you are. Again, a lot of that might be if I'm looking with a team, I've got a lot of churn, a lot of turnover, I've got some new folks coming in, and that's part of my model, or I might have more senior people. All over the board in some respects. Again,
hey, Brian, while they're doing this, when I was speaking with somebody in one of the rooms, there was a lot of talk around like personality profiles and how that plays into coaching, the old Myers-Briggs and those kinds of things. And you can over-rotate on this coaching, I believe. And the simplicity of these 3 categories for me hit home, because behavioral is also important, but it's less important than, I think, than the role that you believe that person wants you to play. And this is not a role you take. This is a role that the relationship you have with that person requires. And the best response you will get from that person you're doing the coaching with. And so it's not suggesting personas and personality profiles aren't helpful in coaching, but this is a meta layer. It's a layer up from that that allows you to have the most constructive output.
I love that.
Yeah, thinking about ways to optimize, Corey, to your point's important. And this came up really early in one of our groups as a very senior leader talked about how dramatically different the behavior of sellers is when he's around and when he joins them, right? So they kind of clam up. They don't operate necessarily authentically and forthright. So his ability to think through how he might adjust, how he provides coaching may be the way to get to a more authentic conversation.
Wow, that is cool. That's a really good point.
I think that's right.
Whoever was that person, thank you for sharing that, because that is really impactful.
Yeah, I was looking for who it was. Sorry, you know who you.
You've internalized that. I think that's right. And in some respects, what we're trying to do, again, we only have a few minutes of time, together today, but the point is, we want to be the nag in the back of your mind as you're starting to go into those coaching conversations, just to pause just a second and think, what is this situation? Who is this person I'm about to interact with? Where are they? And then how do I want to tailor my approach? One last quick question, clear the board on this annotate. I'd like one more quick annotate. Be honest. Which of these three coaching modes do you think is most difficult for you? What is the biggest challenge? What is the most unnatural coaching style that you might find yourself? Corey says a teacher. That's interesting. That I would have thought that would have been the most common, the easiest.
Well, the reason for that is I find myself getting very preachy when I get into like teaching about product or teaching about a specific way to respond. I try purposefully to raise it up to a point where I'm better at asking questions around the situation.
Love it.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad sign when a teacher says I'm bad at teaching. That's probably not.
I wasn't going to call that out, but appreciate that. Again, Eric talked about us being vulnerable and open, so it's part of that happening right now. Advisor, that's not a surprise. I think that's true for a lot of us. Again, especially when we're under pressure, we're in pressure for results, we're in pressure for time. Sometimes it feels easier. I'm just going to be highly directed. I can get in. I start a lot of the conversations, and you want to go through that nice collaborative or teaching kind of mode, and then you just end up, let me clear the decks and tell you what you got to do. Good. I appreciate the honesty, guys. Again, this is part of our own journey, and things that we just got to be more sensitive to as we're trying to be successful in this new world. And I think we want to kind of bring this together, Eric. We've thrown a ton of stuff at people. Oh my gosh. I mean, all the things, and then maybe we're guilty of that image of the poor girl getting fire hosed with all of that information. What do we want to do here? What's the thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we bring this thing home, right, all of this has been great and stimulating from a perspective standpoint, but it's only good, and this is time well spent if you're willing to break a little glass and imagine what you're going to go do with any of it. And so I'm going to now moniker Corey one step ahead of the Sheriff Hutchison, as he talked about these kind of 4 quadrants early as a way to ensure that if everything's important, nothing doesn't happen to you. You've probably come away with some things to think about that you want to go do. And today, with the number of things that you could be considering across 6 dimensions of leadership and 5 building blocks, even for a rhythm and cadence, determining what's first, next, and last can be critical. So we're giving you this 4 quadrant system to have a conversation with yourself and with your teammates around effort and impact. Just making sure that, if you're going to go burn calories on something, it's worthwhile. So if you've begun writing down things that you think you're going to go do, capturing as ideas, then let's start talking about those with our peers and committing these to action. So we're going to put you in a final breakout here, a chance to, rub elbows again one more time. And we're wanting you to consider the topics today that we covered and what you're going to do to apply them. Look at the effort and impact matrix, have a discussion with your peers to rationalize why you think they fit in these boxes. I think that will be helpful to you, and discuss ways to drive a culture of accountability and performance with your teams. By that, I mean, what are you actually going to go do? Are you going to have to go communicate up? Are you going to have to go communicate with peers to create consistency across the enterprise? We talked about that. Or are you just going to go communicate with your teams? So have these discussions as a final way to consider operationalizing anything you talked about here today. Workbook page 17, same rhythm and cadence for the workshop. Have somebody operate as a guide to show page 17 while you're having the discussion. And those of us from TCU and Brevet will join you and gather insights. Thank you.
All right, let's bring it home. All right, Justin.
Trickling in a little more slowly. That may be the conversation. Yeah.
I want one of Jordan's chairs. I mean, that looks so comfortable. I can't even tell you. Look at that thing. That's spectacular.
It's not as comfortable as it looks, I hate to say.
That's interesting. Jordan, how do you say your last name? Aramedi?
It's Daramidi.
Because I was going to quote you, actually. Thank you. One step ahead of the sheriff, Corey.
Awesome.
As people are coming back and we're getting the final folks in, I did see a lot of speaking carry through. There was a lot of energy in these final discussions, and Jordan Daramidi was talking about, having a player coach role. And if nothing else, these 4 quadrants help you to think through. Hey, look, I do a lot of tactical stuff and responsive stuff for myself and for my teammates, because that's the role, but there's an opportunity to get more strategic and prioritizing what I go do so that I can get time back. And I thought that was great. I jumped into another group. I heard Michael Colby proudly using some of the common language. Perhaps he uses it already. But he was talking about definitions of victory and reframing a challenge that he sometimes sees. In their world, getting the meeting is sort of the holy grail, but perhaps it should be reframed to disqualifying people that really aren't going to be good meetings in the first place, right? So that was some of what he was considering as deprioritization versus prioritization. And then Matthew Ross, who's been a regular contributor in the groups that I've been jumping in, talked about recognizing that he should probably tell less through those 3 dimensions we were talking about, and designing and divining an opportunity to go on a listening mission is the way I gathered it, and how that would win. It probably wouldn't be that hard to go listen to people on the team and get some of their perspective. So I implored everyone to get involved, to be brave, and to collaborate with one another. And I saw it like crazy. So thanks.
Awesome. Again, I know we're up against time here, guys. I appreciate everyone's focus and energy, but the point of this last conversation is really, really important. We want you guys to take away all these topics, all the ideas, and some of the new relationships you're starting to form in these breakout conversations, and put it to action. We know there's a lot of power in getting you to write it down. You make a goal and you physically write it down. The amount of just psychological commitment you have to go execute that goal is really, really important. So I want to direct you in the back of your workbook, the last couple of pages. It starts on page 18. We're going to ask you to do a little bit of self-reflection. Don't do it today. Maybe take a couple of days to internalize some of the discussions we've been having. Think about what are ways that I can continue to elevate my role. Think through that prioritization matrix that you guys were just discussing. There's lots of things that you probably could be doing at an organizational or team level. And then there's some things that maybe as individuals at the personal level, we want to maybe take some next steps. Think through that behavior lens. That applies to even ourselves. What are our own behaviors, whether it's cadence and time management, et cetera. And if you flip on the next page, we wanted to offer up a little bit of a template with the principle around behavioral focus and behavioral coaching. Here's something you might be able to use with your team. How do I go through a 5 why exercise to identify what might be 1 or 2 core root cause behaviors that have big benefit, big payoff for me to invest my coaching time on? And then setting some targets, 60, 90 days, whatever makes sense for your business, and trying to, again, write it down and have some commitment to do that. Here's a little word to the wise. We get the opportunity to see these from all over the place, all kinds of teams. And not only is it important to write the goal down, but it's also to write a goal down in a good way. We've seen some bad ones. My absolute very favorite is this over in the lower right. This is a chief revenue officer of a multi-billion-dollar, publicly traded organization, and was apt to use the phrase, "I think we should begin to start to think about." And I don't know about you, but that is the most evasive, non-committal statement. Unfortunately, he didn't last in his role too long by making goals and setting objectives in that way. So think about your language as you go to write it down. And we really want to suggest a couple of quick next steps. Work on your action plan. As Eric said when we started this conversation, that resource center online, that's for you. One of the things we'd like to do, and Justin's going to pop up a quick poll right now, is we'd like your permission to share out the participant list. I think you guys have, here's the first poll. Sorry, my mistake, Justin. Give us some feedback, the topics that we've covered today, things that you found maybe most valuable and interesting to you. That's really helpful for us. And then the next poll we're going to ask about is, would you give your permission to share really just your LinkedIn information, LinkedIn profile? Because we've had some folks that have made some new networking and new relationships we'd like to pursue. Sometimes be able to see that list after the fact and make some of those connections will be helpful. So some good feedback on the topics.
And Brian, with that on the LinkedIn, that's only going to be shared within group. So it's not going to be something that is external to the group that signed up for the workshop.
Awesome. So there's a quick pulse on some of the fig. Again, Corey and I and Eric, we love that, the behavior thing that seemed to resonate. So that is good. Let's see, Justin, you want to do that next poll is that our one for our permission?
A comment on that last question about connecting with TCU or the Brevet Group. It would have been better if it was either one or both. It seemed to be either or.
Fair enough.
Yeah, good point.
So in the back of your participant guide, you've got some contact information for Brevet at least, and then on the web, and we'll put that on our resource center as well, ways to contact the sales center. Lots of great things going on there, and a lot of great opportunities in terms of pipeline of talent and other great ways to get involved. Maybe Zach, I'll throw it back over to you. You got us going this morning. Any other specific next items or final thoughts for our participants?
So first off, thank you, Brian and Eric, for leading an amazing session. Thank you to our facilitators, but most of all, thank you to all the participants. 4 hours on Zoom. Trust me, as a professor, it's very difficult. I thought this was action-packed. Everybody did. The sessions were really great, the breakout sessions. So I'm going to do really quick, close the loop so we can get out of here. I mean, I don't know about you, but we threw a lot of things, and I learned a lot from time management, shifting coaches to behaviors, coaching on mindset, skill set, toolkit, tailor what you do to the reps. I love that point, is it's not a one size fit all. And lastly, and most important, is action. Write it down. If it doesn't get written down, it doesn't get fixed. And so we started this workshop. We started the idea of this workshop for two purposes. And I hope that you got that out of this today. And the first was, we wanted to improve your toolkit, your skill set. We wanted you to be able to walk away from here and implement this with your team. It's one of the foundations of our sales center, is not just to develop talent, but also to help the business community, particularly the sales profession. And hopefully you got that out of today. I think we had a number of great aha moments. And lastly, the sales center, we want to be a bridge. We want to be a bridge to great organizations such as the Brevet Group. Highly recommend, if you need a deeper dive, reach out to Eric and Brian. They work with a number of organizations. If you're looking for talent, or if you're looking to grow your business, reach out to the TCU Sales Center. Our goal in all of our partnerships is to help you grow your bottom line. If that's through talent, if it's through research, if it's through consulting, it's through coaching, we can help you with that as well. So Eric and Brian, it's been a blast. Participants did an amazing job, and I'll be following up with y'all shortly after today's workshop.